I need you to take out your Bibles this morning. I have a new memory verse that I want to start off with today. Starting a new series, and so this verse kind of goes with this series. We will be 3 weeks of discomfort. How does that sound? That's not actually the name of the series, though I guess it could be 3 weeks of discomfort. So let me begin with our memory verse here. It's going to be Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. So I'll give you all a second to turn there or navigate there, depending on what you're doing. I guess navigation works in a physical Bible as well as your digital Bible. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. If you found it, would you read it together with me? Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. See, that one doesn't quite roll off the tongue as much as some of the other ones do. That's true, it doesn't, but it's important. It kind of summarizes where we're going and what we're talking about over the next 3 weeks. Now, our text this morning is going to be in the book of Matthew, if you want to start gearing there. But before we do that, I want to read a statement to you, and I want to ask you to give me a little bit of feedback. So the statement is simply this. The average Christian is the most piercingly critical individual known. Let me read that again. Some of you are like, what? The average Christian is the most piercingly critical individual known. Here's what I want to know from you. How does that statement make you feel? Huh? Cringe. Yeah, definitely a cringe-worthy statement. Anybody feel, I don't know, angry, attacked, maybe vindicated, eviscerated? Pick your word, I don't know. How do you feel about that? Meh. That's not a good response. Well, it's not a bad response. Sometimes we go through life a little too meh. The average Christian is the most piercingly critical individual known. How many of you would consider yourselves an average Christian? More or less, right? So that statement's about you. You are the most piercingly critical individual known. Now, would it surprise you to know that that statement was not made by an enemy to Christianity? That statement, in fact, was made by a guy named Oswald Chambers. If that name doesn't ring a bell, Oswald Chambers penned what is a classic devotional book called My Utmost for His Highest. He is kind of one of those classic Christian authors. Made that statement. The average Christian is the most piercingly critical individual known. He went on to say, because, as long as you're there, you might as well dwell on it. He went on to say, criticism serves to make you harsh, vindictive, and cruel, and leaves you with the soothing and flattering idea that you are somehow superior to others. It's a statement that I think actually aligns well with some of Jesus' words. And so I'd have you go, if you wouldn't mind, Matthew chapter 7. A relatively familiar passage, or at least part of it is, but one that we probably need to revisit from time to time, because if the average Christian is piercingly critical and we are average Christians, then we have a bit of a critical condition. And it's not a critical condition, it's just never good. But that's where we are. We have a condition of being critical condition. As we get to Matthew chapter 7, we find that Jesus issues a command, and it's a command we like to reissue. It's words that we like to put out there. It's sometimes words that people who don't like Christians will like to throw in our faces because they view all Christians as judgmental and critical, which if the average Christian is, then there may not be wrong, and that's not comfortable news to share. But here's Jesus' words. He issues a command, and it's a simple command. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with what measure you use, it will be measured back to you. The command is simple. It's direct. Do not judge. Now let me just take a real quick moment here for a survey. How many of you understand that? Do not judge. Anybody have any questions that are like, I'm not sure what that means, do not judge? It's simple, it's direct, we understand it, we get it. Now, the word that's translated there, judge, not to muddy the waters, but the word that's translated there, judge, has actually kind of two shades of meaning. And the first shade of meaning is to call somebody into question. It's more of an accusation than an investigation, though. It's like you see something in their lives, you see an activity, you sense an attitude in them, and you immediately feel compelled to call them in question, call them on the carpet, to accuse them of what you're seeing. The second shade of meaning follows kind of right on the heels, is to condemn. It's to see an action, to sense an attitude in somebody else, and immediately to condemn them for it. We have never, any of us, done this, I know. And so this is all foreign theoretical stuff for us, right? Or not. Judge not, that you, judge not, do not judge. Don't call into question that accusation, and don't be anxious to condemn. Both of those actions are forbidden by this one command. Now, the command is simple, but it comes with an inherent consequence. What did he say? Do not judge. Why? That you be not judged. There's a consequence in there. When we judge, we will be judged, and how we judge is how we will be judged. But the consequence, if we choose to ignore Jesus' command, is that we will be judged. Now, that raises the natural question of what? By whom? Who has the right to judge me? Who has the right to step into that? Well, I mean, let's not talk about rights, because honestly, if we're judging others, we've kind of foregone that, haven't we? The by whom here is by other people. Judgment creates and fosters an attitude, a culture, a response of judgment. If you're going to condemn me, what is my instinctive response? I'm going to condemn you back, right? That's just how we roll. And so Jesus said here, do not judge, or we will be judged. When we call people's actions and motives into questions, they're going to call our actions and motives into question. When we condemn other people, they're going to condemn us. We'll be condemned by other people. As long as we all judge each other, we will all be judged by each other. How do we stop this vicious cycle of criticism and judgmentalism? By stopping, right. I know it's kind of a hard one there. It's simply by stopping. If we don't judge, we actually kind of break that cycle. We stop that forward momentum and progress of judgment. It doesn't mean it's going to fix it. There's still going to be a lot of judgmental people around us. But by not contributing to it, we begin to slow it down. We begin to deter it, to distract it. We have to actually abolish the atmosphere of judgment that allows condemnation to be acceptable. That's a hard thing to do, because if the average Christian is very judgmental, what does that make the average church being a collection of average Christians? An atmosphere of judgmentalism that has to be abolished. So we get the command. It's not a hard command. We get the consequence that goes with it. But then Jesus asks a question. Now understand, I know sometimes that we get this idea that Jesus was this really sanctified, dignified, always straight, always serious, very, I don't even know, because it's such a caricature. Jesus was 100% God. He is 100% God. Let me get my tense right. He's also 100% human, which means he is a lot like us in a lot of ways. Now, he didn't sin, but that doesn't mean he didn't enjoy himself. He didn't know how to have fun. He did. You think about it, if Jesus was boring and judgmental all the time, would people have flocked to hear him? Especially we get in the Gospels, the crowd that flocked to him weren't the righteous people that were anxious to be in Jesus' company. It was the unrighteous people. It was the people who partied a little too hard, who got carried away a little too far, who, they were on the out and out, and sometimes they were there because they tried to be there. These are the people that gravitated to Jesus. These are not people who gravitate to stuffy religious figures. They're people who gravitate to somebody who's just like a normal person. And so that's instructive about who Jesus was. But so Jesus asked this question, and it's very spiritual and sanctified on the one hand. On the other hand, it's ridiculous. Right? Here's the question he asks. Look at verse 3. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? What? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Let me ask you a question. What was Jesus' trade before he was a homeless peasant preacher? The carpenter. He was a builder. Do you think Jesus knew what sawdust felt like in the eye? Probably. So this is one of those situations where Jesus kind of relies on his upbringing, being a carpenter, being a builder. A speck is literally that. It's the smallest little speck of sawdust. A plank, by contrast, is a little bigger, right? It's like walk the plank. It's not a speck, right? You get a big piece of wood. And so the visual that Jesus is trying to convey here is intentionally ridiculous. Because if you have a plank in your eye, one, you have problems. But you're literally walking out with a board sticking out of your eye. It sounds painful. But if I were to come over to you with this board in my eye and go, hey, let me get that speck out of your eye here, what's going to hit you first? The board is, right? And so Jesus is intentionally being ridiculous as he asks this question. Why do you look? And this is really kind of the crux of the question, isn't it? Why do you look? Why do you look for a piece of sawdust in your brother's eye when you have a board sticking out of yours? Why are you looking? And the illusion is, why are you looking for the smallest issue that they have in their life when you have this motherlode monster issue in yours? When you have a real personality problem, when you have a real spiritual problem, and it's big and it's observable, it's something that everybody sees and everybody knows is there. Why would you, in that setting and in that situation, go up to another person with a very small problem in their life and try to deal with their problem? Jesus is like, why do you look? You have literally bigger fish to fry. If you have a major problem in your life, you should not be looking at other people's lives to see the problems they have. Jesus' statement is, you really ought to be focused on the large problem that you have in your own life. Deal with it first. And so he asks, why do you look? And then, how do you say? Have you ever received advice from somebody who shouldn't have been given it? It's that person who just longs to help you figure out and fix that little nuance in your life when they clearly have some major life issues. And you're like, You listen because you don't want to be rude, but you're thinking the whole time, your life is so jacked up. Why would I take advice from you? Even if you were right, I would be afraid to take your advice because you're wrong in so many other areas. You know, the kind of person that says, hey, the sky's blue, and you poke your head out just to make sure because you're not real clear, you're not real sure. You ever had those kind of people in your life? And so Jesus is saying, how can you, and it's absolutely preposterous in Jesus' thinking that somebody with a board sticking out of their eye would walk up to somebody with a speck of sawdust in their eye and try to remove it. He's like, this is... And so what does he say? You are a hypocrite. How many of you would love to be hit with that moniker? A hypocrite, now the word is just translated, today we would use the term actor. I mean, that's what the Greek word comes out of, is somebody who, it was used of actors, somebody who is pretending to be something they aren't. And Jesus says, you're pretending to be something that you're not. You're pretending to be okay enough to offer advice. You're pretending that your life is going smoothly enough that you can help somebody else with theirs. This is not a small charge that Jesus levels at these people. He says, you are a hypocrite. What does he say? Fix your life. And then, if there's time and space left over, you'll be in a position where you can help somebody else fix theirs. But if you're not going to be willing to get rid of the board that's sticking out of your own eye, don't worry too much about the sawdust in anybody else's eye. Don't pretend that everything is fine and that you know and that you are able to help when you're not. So we get a command, and we get a question. You know, I think at the end of that verse, and have you seen that video that flies around on, I think it's on YouTube, mind your business. Mind your own business. Worry about yourself. That's what it is. Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. I'm like, that's great advice. A child shall lead them. Worry about yourself. That's kind of what Jesus is doing and saying there. But then he gives. So we get a command, we get a question. In verse 6, this is the part that's a bit odd. There's a curiosity that is here in verse 6. Jesus made this wonderfully direct and easy to understand statement. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you into pieces. We got that, right? Some of you read that and are like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. Because on the surface, this verse seems disconnected and even, let's admit it, a little random. Like the rest of this we got, okay, the board and the sawdust thing, okay, that's a bit extreme, almost silly, but this is just, we've entered kind of random now. That's on the surface. Really, it's neither. Jesus was a master communicator, and so as he spoke, and the things that he said were very carefully measured words, and they're there, and the ones that we don't understand are the ones we really need to push at until we do. So when we think about this particular statement, casting our pearls before swine, giving what is holy to the dogs. You think about it. Don't raise your hands, but just think in your hearts, how many of you have ever given advice to somebody else? Like, we can all raise our hands, because we've all done this, right? When you give advice to somebody else, do you think it's good advice? Well, duh, because if you thought it was a bad advice, hopefully you'd keep your big fat mouth shut. Right? I think, anytime, and I've tried to for me, I try to wait and say, okay, when When is unsolicited advice going to be welcome? Because it's not always welcome. But when we give advice, especially the unsolicited variety, we think this is earth-shatteringly genius. I can solve all of your problems with one pithy statement. And so I'm going to give you my advice. When we speak in that moment, we ascribe to ourselves the oracles of God that we are going to impart some wonderful divine understanding and wisdom into your life that will be earth-changing, life-changing, valuable things that you didn't understand or consider before. That's how we view our wisdom. That's how we view our advice. Now, this is clearly coming from us, right? Don't give what is holy to the dogs, or cast your pearls before swine. This is advice from the giver of the advisor. You're obviously too stuck in the mire and mud of life to have thought of this, so let me impart some wisdom here to you. Jesus said, don't. Just don't. Why? Lest they turn, tear you in pieces, and trample your wisdom underfoot. People receiving your advice who really view it as criticism, right? Because that's how it usually comes off, doesn't it? Unsolicited advice usually takes the term of "you're an idiot, let me help you live your life better." That's criticism. That's how we receive it. They think of your criticism as meaningless, in the best case scenario, or insulting in the worst case scenario. And if they view it as insulting, they're going to turn on you in the same way that they feel you have turned on them. And they're going to start tearing, and they're going to start trampling, and it's just going to get bad. The cycle of destructive criticism kind of comes full circle, and it starts to repeat itself. When you criticize me, it takes a lot for me to say, hey, there may be a nugget of truth to that. My instinct is to say, well, who gives you the right to judge? The Bible says, judge not. I got a verse for you. Judge not. And I'm going to judge you for judging me. And it just gets harsh and critical and cyclical as we begin to bite and trample and devour each other. In this particular case, we judge others as a means of justifying our own flaws. Yeah, I got a board in my eye, so what? You got stuff in your eye too. Okay, that's a bit ridiculous. But we've all said similar things, haven't we? From time to time. I know I'm not perfect, but either are you. Well, of course I did it. You did it. They did it. Why can't I do it? This is wholly illogical. Can we agree on that in this moment, in this space? Those are just illogical statements. They're childish. But when your children say it to you, you reprimand them and say, well, you know, if your friends all jump off a cliff, are you going to jump off a cliff too? Which is equally infantile, but whatever, that's what we say. Justifying our own flaws is not helpful to ourselves or to others. What is helpful? When we can identify a flaw, especially one in ourselves, because the person with the board sticking out of their eye, they know it's there, they just are choosing not to care in this moment. They're choosing to pick on your flaw instead of theirs because by you having a flaw, somehow they feel better about themselves. So what if you're the person walking around with a board? Do you know you have a board? Sure you do. Do you need me really to sit here and point out all your flaws to you? No, because you know what they are. And the ones you're not sure about, the Holy Spirit is going, and this, 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 and this. Right? Because like if I had to say, hey, how many of you have flaws, make a list. And you're not going to share that list with anybody. You're just going to burn it when you're done. How many of you would have a long list? Don't raise your hands. We know what our flaws is. So if justifying our flaws by attacking somebody else isn't helpful, what is helpful? This is complicated. It's going to be addressing our own flaws. This is what Jesus said. Take the board out of your own eye. Deal with your own issue. Address your own flaw. How do we do that? It's going to take hard work. It's going to take real hard life working on ourselves work. First of all, accepting the forgiveness of God. A lot of times our flaws stem from unforgiveness. It's going to take asking and receiving the strength of God. Say, God, I've got a problem here. You've forgiven me for it, but I still have the problem. I need to get past this. I need to get this plank out of my eye. God said He'll help you, but you're going to have to do the hard work of actually doing the doing. Dealing with the flaws in your own lives. Is it easy? No. Is it essential? Yes. Is it better than criticizing the people around us as a way to make ourselves feel better? I think we would agree with Jesus that it's a better way. That criticizing somebody else to make ourselves feel better about our own flaws really is foolish. It's really destructive. It's really hurtful. We need to abolish judgmentalism, criticism, and the atmosphere that lets them thrive. You say, do we have a problem with that here at our church? Yes, we do. Why? Because we're all average Christians. We don't, as a church, have a problem with everybody judging each other. Could we? Yeah, because we all have that critical bent, that critical tendency that left unchecked could get very ugly very quickly, couldn't it? So my encouragement to you today, in the critical condition that you find yourself, don't be critical. Don't talk about other people. Certainly don't talk to them about your criticism. Talk to God about your own flaws and deal with them. And maybe let Him deal with their flaws. I think that'll work. That's how we abolish an atmosphere of criticism. And we get on happier with our lives. Would you stand with me? We'll close there with a word of prayer. And then we'll clean up stuff. Father, we love you. Thank you for your word. Lord, it is to our own shame and sin that we would confess before you that we are, all of us, critical people. It seems to be part of our flawed, fallen human nature that we rush to judge other people. And we are sometimes very hesitant to judge our own selves and our own flaws. Father, would you help us to receive your forgiveness and to seek your strength and restoration to deal with the flaws in our own life? And Father, would you give us the focus to say that's where we need to be, not to be critical of other people. They stand or fall before you. We're not supposed to judge them. Help us to be there. We want to be there. Help us to go this week and practice this. We pray in Jesus' good name.